Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX consulting company doing fun things like projects, training, and consulting. And welcome to episode 156, which is transitioning from academia into a non-academic UX universe. And before we bring in our super special guest, as always, let me just thank all of the people who are donating to the channel through the YouTube join button thingy known as memberships. And people are giving between $3 and $10 American dollars per month to help me out with the costs of my streaming software and delicious chocolate chips, which I did not eat today. I tried to make today a singing day. Do not eat chocolate chips on singing day. Okay, so with that being said, hello to I-10, who of course transitioned from academia after a master's degree, and someone from LinkedIn, sorry it's not giving me your name, says, hello. I-10 says, me and my glass of wine and my dinner is here. I think it's in that order. All right, so let's bring in our super special guest, and she's a friend of the show. You may have seen her in the comments in the past, and now she's with us. Everybody please meet Alaina. Alaina, please spell yourself and tell us all about you.
Hi, I'm Alaina Talboy. My Alaina, and Talboy is T as in Thomas, ALB as in Bravo, OY. I have been following this show for a while. It has been a phenomenal resource as I switched from academia in 2019 to UX research, and this show has just been an amazing help going through that transition process. So thank you, and thanks for having me today.
Thank you. So tell us all about your background. Tell us a little bit about your education and where you've worked, because I've seen your LinkedIn and you have an impressive resume, as we say in America.
Thank you. So I did my PhD at the University of South Florida in Florida, US, and I studied cognitive psychology in the cognition, neuroscience, and social psychology program. And so I do a ton of research in decision making and reasoning, specifically when numbers are involved. So I am the person that loves statistics, and I love teaching statistics, and I use them as much as I can because I think there's just so much value we can get from quantitative methodologies. And so I started there, published pretty prolifically, got an offer for a tenure track position, and decided to turn it down and joined industry instead. And there's a lot of reasons there, but for the most part, I wanted to live in Seattle. And I got an offer at Microsoft to join as a user researcher. And it's really hard to tell Microsoft no, yeah. So I joined Microsoft as a vendor or a contractor, depending on which term you want to use. I was a vendor for the Edge browser doing user research for about 4 months. And then I was converted to a full-time employee and became a full-time employee where I worked in the enterprise and security space for a while. After that, I went to work at Indeed in their AI ethics division, and now I'm back at Microsoft as a senior research manager.
Ooh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving on up. Great, and thank you for that. And just since we're talking about academics, I apologize if this puts you on the spot. Did you do a master's degree?
I did, actually. I took a non-traditional route. I had actually dropped out of college twice. Went to work, went back to college, went to work, went back to college. Had my son. He's now 12 years old. You'll hear him pop into the room every so often. But I had him, and then I started a master's degree a year later. And so I did my master's at the University of West Florida in experimental psychology, and worked in the memory lab and worked in the Center for Research on Aging. And after I did the master's degree, then I switched and did my PhD.
So when you first started working at Microsoft, if you can remember those 3 or so long years ago, I mean, the pandemic feels like it started 27 years ago, so this may be
Oh,
a distant memory. But can you think of some of the things that surprised you that maybe you expected to be able to do or expected to do because of your academic experience, and then you were like, oh, whoa, hold on, change gears?
Yep. So there's an assumption that you have a PhD, that you are just going to step into any research role and immediately know exactly what you're doing. And I gotta say,
Ah.
this is like a hard slap in the face sometimes. You gotta like just let your ego go, man. Like there are terms in UX research that kind of map to terms in experimental research, and it's not quite a one-to-one, but you can get there. Like an A/B test, you use a t-test. There's these simple overlaps, but you just gotta swallow your ego for a minute. Because yes, you have a PhD. Yes, you are a badass and a rock. Oh, I'm not allowed to curse on the show.
No, you can. You can curse on the show.
Oh,
Dr. Nick
cool.
does constantly.
Awesome. So you have an amazing skill set, but you still have to learn the language of the role you're jumping into. And that's something that I see people kind of stumbling over sometimes, is that they're not, you got to go buy the books, you got to go read the pages, you got to go read all the things and learn what these terms mean and why they're used in the way that they are. You got to understand that usability testing is typically 5 to 8 people and why it's only 5 to 8 people. And so there's a
Per
couple things you got to
persona
learn there.
or segment.
Exactly. So, I think that's like the thing that stuck out to me the most, is that I had a PhD, still had to like swallow my ego and learn, and I'm still learning to this day. And that's really the kind of cool thing about where I'm at right now, is that I get to learn entirely new things just because it's part of my job and it's fun and I get paid to do it.
Paid to do fun is great. I wish more UX jobs were like that. You're super lucky.
I am very fortunate.
Yes. And Aitan says she's very impressed, raising her glass to all successful women in and out of academia. Yes. I'm having watered down fruit juice as always. And Marcella says, hi, Debbie and Alaina. Glad you're covering this topic. Yeah, us too. Let us know if you have any questions. I see between YouTube and LinkedIn, I see about 20 people joining us live. Thanks for joining us live. And if you have any questions, ask them. That's why Alaina's here. Let's also talk while we wait for some questions. I was very excited that you published a book in the last few months. So tell everybody about your book and where they can find it. Hey, Whitney.
All right,
Hey,
so
Aitan. There it
my
is. What
book.
I Wish I Knew. Okay, a field guide for, hold on, I'm reading it. What I Wish I Knew, a field guide for thriving in graduate studies. So tell us, what's that really about? Because it sounds like thriving in graduate studies, but does it include the transition to industry?
It does. And so here's the deal. This is not the book that you're going to pick up and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to write papers. This is how I'm going to get through my dissertation. This is how I'm going to, it's none of, like, there's a little bit of that, but it's none of that. I have a section that starts off with framing what it actually means to be in graduate studies, to be working on an advanced degree. And it's really all about how you talk about yourself, how you structure your time, how you balance work and life, because, oh geez, it is so easy to overwork yourself in graduate studies and think that that's completely normal, and it's not. And that, like, I just did a piece on the Hello PhD podcast a couple weeks ago, talking about why identity matters so much when you talk about yourself in graduate school. The second part of that is using these common academic tasks that we do every single day, like organizing your notes, creating work back plans, public speaking, as this is one of them, building research portfolios and storytelling, really bringing together those skill sets that are just going to enable your career further down the road. And then the third section of the book is all about advancing to industry. So, people go into graduate studies working on a PhD, often thinking academia is the only job for them. In reality, it's not. And a little bit of the disconnect comes because they don't believe that they're actively prepared to take a job in industry, But in reality, they pretty much are. It's really a terminology issue. And that's what I point out a lot in the third section. So I talk about, the sunk cost fallacy and how people feel leaving academia. I've written about this extensively. Like, it feels like you lose a piece of your identity when you leave academia. And that's a hard transition. But other than that, I talk about how you take all those great skills that you've developed, all those accomplishments, and really turn them into a CV or a resume in industry that's going to get you a job that you're really going to enjoy and value going forward. Talk about networking and how you go and build out your professional network and why that matters. And again, following it up with picking a path based on what you see in your network, because we can't know what we don't know, right? So if you're not looking at what that larger job market is, you have no idea what's possible out there. So networking is really crucial to figuring out where you can go with your PhD at the end of it.
Great. Thank you for all that. And let's see, we have a long question from I-10, so I'm going to read it out
Okay.
loud, and it sounds like this. So in academia, you don't have to convince anybody that your work is important because you're surrounded by researchers and like-minded people. You might prove the point of your research topic or methods, but not your field of study. But it's not reality for most companies when it comes to UX research. Often you have to convince people that, yeah, what you do matters. It's two different worlds. How did you deal with it?
That's a great question. That has been a constant since I've switched to UX, is constantly showing, here's the value of research, here's why it matters. And really, from what my point of view, is that it seems like people see UX research as this really easy thing that everyone can do. And this gets into the democratizing research debate, and I do apologize for that, but it always does. Is we have these companies like User Testing and User Zoom putting out articles that says everyone can do research, everyone can do this thing. And it's really not the case. Yeah, you can go and ask people questions, and you can go be customer centric by talking to your customers, but you don't know if you're asking the right questions. You don't know if you're asking them in a way that's leading. And if you don't have that training, it's really hard to
Right.
pull that out. So most of my jobs over the years has been very clearly explaining, here's what goes into this kind of research. And I've built out timetables, and I've built out, explanations for why building up a protocol takes 5 to 7 hours, why the interview analysis takes 10 to 15 hours sometimes. All of this stuff really matters. And it's mostly because people have no idea how long the real research takes and why it's important to do real research in a rigorous and ethical way.
Yeah, and
I
ethics
know
isn't.
that's
No, so is there anything specific that you did, like in your job at Microsoft, or did you even have to prove in Microsoft that research is important?
I did. A lot of what I have to do is really just have conversations with other people. So I am constantly in meetings with PMs and designers and engineers, really just kind of breadcrumbing research findings as I go, and really just harping on the value of research and why it's so important to talk to customers. And it's a little bit of the availability of information and making sure research is constantly in the conversation, because historically it hasn't always been. And so that's how I work through that. It's just a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings.
Oh, lots of meetings. We love those. We have a fun question from Hung over in the chat room, and he wants to know, what about transitioning from UX research to academia? Have you ever spoke to or coached or discussed with anyone like, hey, I've been working in corporate and I think I just want to go get that PhD and become a
I
professor?
have. Yes, yes. And I have had this conversation several times, is that, someone's been working in UX for, 5 or 10 years, and they want the advanced degree in something like cognitive psychology, or they want to go to human computer interaction, any kind of related field, even sociology and anthropology. There are so many great fields that you can go into. And what I tell them is it is a very personal choice. you will have people tell you that a PhD is not worth it. You will have people tell you a PhD is absolutely worth it. For me, a PhD is something I wanted. That is like it's on my wall here. It is something I am proud of. I fought hard for this. I did a ton of work to earn it. And I will always have that PhD after my name or doctor in front of my name because it's something I accomplished that makes me so proud. And so for me, absolutely worth it. So I'm in that other camp. And so when people come to me and ask, like, is it worth it? I tell them to look at their own life. What do they want to accomplish? What is a PhD or a master's degree going to help them get? And do they really want those credentials, or do they want to do a job that they think needs those credentials but doesn't necessarily need it? So, and that's the importance of understanding what a graduate studies program actually is. A PhD is a 5 to 8 year commitment. That's a long time.
It's raising a
So
baby.
exactly. You need to be really sure that this is something you actively want to do.
I'm so glad we've got Koyel here. I've met her before. I think she has a PhD in sociology, and she's trying now to transition into UX research. Hopefully, Koyel, I've remembered your story correctly. If not, please correct me. And she wants to know, what do you think helped you in getting your first role in UX research?
I tell you, I have an amazing circle of friends and colleagues who helped me agonize through this process for so long. Um, oh man. So I had an 8-page CV. I published prolifically when I was in graduate studies, and I did a lot of talks and I taught a lot of courses. So I had a longer CV than might be typical. Turning that into a 2-page resume was incredibly difficult. And so thankfully, my partner was a wonderful support and my friends were great. And they kept reading over my resume for me for like 3 months. And I go through and I chop it down and they go back and say, no, like get rid of all of this. And so really having people who have worked in industry before, who have been hiring managers and have seen, hundreds of resumes, they're like, none of this matters, like get rid of all of it. And as an academic, it's like it's heartbreaking because like I love my publications. I'm proud of them. But no one wants to see them in industry. um,
Sorry.
I know. To be fair, I do have 2 still listed on my resume. I snuck them in at the very bottom of the second page.
More available upon request.
Exactly. So what I found, and that's something I published in the book, was a lot of what I needed to do was turn my work into action verbs. And so instead of talking about the classes that I taught, as I developed the first online psych stats course for the University of South Florida. This is way back before the pandemic, so don't at me. But it was the first online psych stats course, and it is still taught at the university to this day using the materials I created. And that's a pretty nice little feather in my academic cap, but that doesn't matter in industry. What they care is that I developed extensive learning materials. I engaged students and I evaluated competencies. Those action words that they really want to see in your resume. So it's a forward thinking process instead of a CV, which is very backward facing. And so that was my friends and family did that a whole lot for me, got me down to 2 pages. And that's how I ended up at Microsoft.
All right. And we've got some more questions in the chat room. I-10 has kind of a double question. We'll poke her for asking a double barrel question. How do you deal with concepts like design thinking, rebranding classic research methodologies as if they brought them to the table, not psychology or anthropology? And does this whole design thinking thing and rebranding thing happen at Microsoft?
Yes.
Oh, the conversations you and I have had.
I know. And I gotta say, I roll with the punches at this point of my career. There's always going to be someone fighting for it. There's always going to be someone fighting against it. I don't know. At this particular day, I'm not interested in being in that fight. So I'm just like, yeah, great. I'm going to sit back and watch. Maybe in another day we could have a more full on conversation about that.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a hill you just don't want to die on.
Yeah, pretty much. So I'm still doing research, I'm still doing science, and I'm doing it in a way that makes sense for me and the product I support, and that at the end of the day is what matters.
Yeah, and if they have great research, whether they take that into user-centered design or design thinking or design sprints, hypothetically, if they're bringing great research insights into these things, they have some shot of good outcomes. To me, a lot of it revolves around the research and making sure we're replacing guesses and assumptions with knowledge.
Exactly. Evaluate your assumptions and biases every day, all the time.
Every day. Let's see. More questions? Did I miss something? While we wait for some more questions, I know one question that I've had around this is I've had some conversations with people who have the PhD. They did anthropology, sociology, psychology, something that it will help them get into UX research, and they
Hmm.
tend to wonder. What jobs should I apply for? If I've been in academia for some years or I spent 5 years on my PhD, do I have 5 years of experience and now I should be a senior or lead? Or should I be starting out more mid level or junior because while I have some translatable skills, it's my first UX job? What do you tend
Yeah.
to advise people about the right level of job to apply for when you haven't had a UX job before, but you have the academic background?
Uh, yeah, that's a great question. And so this is one I think, again, takes a bit of personal reflection and a really hard, honest look at yourself. For me, I had great research experience. I'm an advanced experimental methodologist. Like I said, I'm a quant by nature. I'm also mixed methods trained. Um, but coming into UX research, I was still a bit novice. I didn't have the right terminology. I didn't have the right names. And I could have, spent a couple months brushing up on that before I started applying. I didn't. I'll just be frank. I didn't. And so I went in as a very early, um, you say mid-level. I'm at like the bottom of mid-level, like almost at that very early entry UX research. And so that's how I went in because I didn't have the terminology. But I worked very hard those first 4 months and really busted my butt to learn the language, get into the system, figure out how UX plugs into business processes, do all the things that really needed to level me up and tap into my research expertise. And then I got to that mid level, just within those first 6 months. And that's something I felt that I needed to do, though. I have seen some people come in straight from their PhD into a senior role. They've done okay. But it's that ego piece again. You got to be able to let go and realize you need to learn some things. And I feel like if you come in as a senior and you haven't done the work to learn those things and you're not willing to do the work at those things, you're not going to be a senior for very long.
Yeah,
So,
I had a guy bitch me out in some YouTube comments, gosh, a year or more ago now, and he was like, "I've got 16 years of academic research or laboratory research or something. Where's my senior UX researcher job?" And I was like, depending upon how much of your skills translate, you might be a
mm-hmm,
junior. I said, have you recruited? If you're doing
mm-hmm,
laboratory, now I come from chemistry. So when I think laboratory research, I think me and an Erlenmeyer flask, alone for,
yeah,
for 3 years. And then I forget that, oh yeah, there's lab research where there's humans. But,
mm-hmm,
did you have to recruit? Did you have to what did your planning look like? Did you take
yeah,
8 months to plan? I know academics sometimes take longer to do things. We can't get away with
yeah,
that here. So I try
yeah.
to gently remind people that chances are, even if you have academic background and laboratory experience, not everything is going to translate perfectly. There's going to be a learning curve.
Yeah. But also, don't think of that as a bad thing either.
Right.
So here, the way I see it is like, okay, you start here with a bachelor's degree, and you go into UX, and you have this nice steady progression, and you get to senior about over here somewhere, all right? You start with a PhD, you're slightly higher. You come in at the same level though, but your increase and your trajectory goes so much faster if you put in the work to make sure your skills translate correctly. And that's really what it comes down to. And so, yes, you have a PhD. Yes, you're an expert in your field. That is freaking wonderful. That is awesome. Bring your expertise, please. I want to learn what you know, and I want to know what you know. But be aware, you do need to learn a few things.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I-10 reminds us there's a bunch of different kinds of research. Googling is
Google research is
research.
not research.
Yeah, well,
I'm going
Google
to die
research
on that hill.
pretends to be. People will tell me that's desk research. So I know,
right,
I
we'll have a
know.
conversation about that.
Look, I'm probably more in your camp, but we know what point I-10's making. I-10, remind us what your master's degree was in, because I don't remember what it was in. I-10 says, she says, well, it's called Google Research. Well, Alaina is going to have a sword fight with you now. But Wilson had a question that I wanted to jump in with, and he said, hey, I joined a little late. Did Alaina say why she chose to transition to UX research?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Is that something
yep.
if you don't have to answer questions here on this show, if that's something you'd like to skip, we can move on.
No, actually, it is a good question, and it is one that I find resonates with more people than I expect. So I had a 10-year offer to join an R2 school in the U.S. For those that aren't familiar, the research levels are R3, R2, R1, with R1 being the highest level research. An R2 school is 50% of your time is research, 50% of your time is teaching. And so that was an offer that I had coming in. Which was something that I really wanted. I had worked a long time to get a professor title. It was very exciting to get that offer immediately after defending my dissertation. The problem was multifold. One, it was in a place I didn't want to live. And it was in a place where my son couldn't get the services that he needs because he's a special needs student. And so he needs a bit of extra resources in an educational environment. Two, the pay was not the best, and it wasn't the best. And
well, those two reasons are good enough right there. You're not in a place where you want to live. Well, three reasons. You're not in a place where you want to live. Your son is unlikely to get the services he needs, and the pay was not very good. Those are three excellent reasons.
Yep. And there is a fourth reason here, is that my research at the time was in medical decision making and helping people understand really complicated statistics when it came to making decisions for their health, for their personal health and their family's health. And I saw my research getting published and getting great reviews and not getting picked up in the public at all, actually until COVID hit. And then I saw a huge uptick in my articles being used and cited. But it took a pandemic for my work to get out and get to the public and actually start being used to inform people to make better health decisions for themselves and others. And that was really frustrating, whereas in industry, I see my research having impact within weeks. And that is just something you can't get in academia.
That's a great point, too. So thinking about some, and of course, Wilson says, thank you for being transparent. And I-10 says, RIP, both of my thesis works. I'm pretty sure nobody read them except my supervisors. LOL crying emoji. Sorry, I-10. I-10 has a master's in applied cultural analysis.
Ooh.
From somewhere in Sweden, from what I remember.
Interesting.
So thinking about some of the people who are looking to transition after getting that master's or PhD, I think some people are like, well, if I just need to learn some lingo and get used to the UX way of doing it, I'll go to a boot camp.
Oh no, I knew
You
this was
know,
coming.
I'm sorry. I have to ask. So, thinking about some of the boot camps and online courses that are out there, are there any that you feel good about or recommend?
If you feel
I need like
um
thinking. I need like thinking music. Hold on.
yeah, if you feel like a 6-week boot camp is going to give you the same level of expertise and understanding as the 6 years it took to get my PhD, become an expert in advanced cognition, reasoning, and decision making, by all means, please attend a boot camp. I don't have any that I can recommend to you. I'm sorry.
That was an exceedingly well-crafted response. I think we all heard that. Okay, let me cross that one off the list. Good. Um, let's also talk about the portfolio. I think some people from
Yeah.
academia probably feel pressured to take things they did in academia and reword them, retell the story, and try to make it
Yep.
UXy. I think I've even seen a couple of people change like their resume or CV to make it look like I did UX research at this institution or whatever. And so, what's your advice for people either over fine tuning those resumes or portfolios?
One of the 3 pillars of scientific thinking is intellectual honesty. And if you're not going to be honest from the get-go, what are you even doing?
So
Like,
true.
you
Thank
didn't do
you.
UX. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I Tomorrow I'm going to be a gatekeeper.
Yes, I
Uh,
can say I
no.
love that. Alaina is a
Yeah, no,
gatekeeper.
so I didn't do UX in my PhD. I didn't. I have done UX type things that I could if I wanted to try to like bend. But no, I was an experimental psychologist. I did experimental research. I did really foundational, groundbreaking research. And if you're doing a PhD, you're doing really foundational, groundbreaking research. Please don't try to minimize what you have done. And don't lie about what you have done. It's just not worth it. I'm sorry. I'm going to tear you apart if I see your portfolio and I very clearly know you're doing a 3x2 analysis of variance. That is not a usability test. Come on.
Ooh, pew pew, and scene. Okay, I want to know if people have questions, especially the people in the live chat, hopefully still here, like Koyel and people who might have advanced degrees and are wondering things. We'll jump on I-10's question, which is, do all the researchers at Microsoft have PhDs, and how do you collaborate with other researchers? Again, with the double questions.
All right, to the first one, no, not all user researchers at Microsoft have PhDs. Every single company I've ever collaborated with, ever worked with, there has been a range from a bachelor's degree all the way up to a PhD, all the way up to people who have like double PhDs. Which let's pause for a moment there and be like, congratulations, but WTF? Um, and then for the second part of that, how do you collaborate with other researchers? Multiple ways. I have conversations like this with Debbie. I have, conversations about, what method to use, why it's appropriate. We have the more theoretical conversations of like, where is user research going as a field? That's always a fun one. Where has user research been and how does it come out of things like HCI and psychology and sociology and anthropology? The conversations are varied and broad.
The chat room is reacting to double PhD, and I'm reminding them that we had John N.A. Brown on our show. He has 3 PhDs.
Three
And
PhDs.
and he's going to
Ooh.
start to be a recurring guest. People really loved him on the
Oh
show. So
man.
starting in September, he's going to be doing office hours with me once a month. Um,
Awesome.
uh, yeah, I hope people. I don't know if you caught him on the last show, but he's really excellent. Just a lovely human, and holy cats knows his stuff. Oh
I imagine
gosh,
after 3 PhDs he would.
Yeah, but they weren't necessarily on UX, of course, and he's also working in UX, so he's got kind of both of those.
Oh,
He should be here today. So yeah, you don't have to get 3 PhDs, everybody. Here's Lena. Lena says, when you do user research, how do you recruit your participants? Do you have your own user group circle? Do you work with agencies, etc.?
So it is really a mixed bag. There are, customer engagement programs that we work with. We have, snowball recruiting, which is always a good one if you already have a company you're working with. We have agencies that we can partner with to do larger global type research. Typically, some of our programs have a res ops who's responsible for recruiting on behalf of you. We do use a lot of things like user testing and user Zoom for recruitment pools. So really, there's just numerous methods.
Cool. Thank you. Good to hear that you and Microsoft use these normal methods. It's not like you have some weird. We go out into the street with a ray gun and we zap people. Janice is asking, hi, Alaina and Debbie. Apologies, joining a little late. Sorry if this was asked already, but what do you do to prepare for UXR interviews?
So this is interviewing for a UXR position, I'm assuming. Right.
I'm not too sure. I wonder if Janice actually means the interview sessions with the participants.
Sessions. Okay. Um,
To
so
prepare.
yeah. So I have my conversations with the PMs or the designers or engineers who are requesting the research, or who may be involved in some way. Figure out what are the goals, what are they trying to figure out, what do they really want to answer, because more often than not, the questions that they bring to the table are not the questions we're actually going to answer in research studies. And then I gather all that information, my own expertise in the product space, figure out, what are the actual research questions we want to answer, what's going to be the most valuable for our customers. Because as a researcher, the customer is always who I am focusing on, secondary to that product. Or I'm sorry, product is secondary to the customers. So it's a bit flipped from other roles in the company. And so once I have that, I figure out which methodology to use. I build out the protocol for the study. That way there's documentation. I do my ethics review of, is this going to be beneficial to the larger community? Are we making sure there's no harm coming out of this? And then work with either res ops or go do recruiting, run the study.
Now, I want to say I absolutely loved your answer, but it turns out Janice actually meant something else. So that was my fault in misinterpreting that, though I still loved your answer to the question I ended up asking. Janice meant, sorry, my mistake. Janice says, sorry, I was asking about when you were transitioning from academia, how did you prepare for interviewing with companies looking for a UX researcher?
Yep. Yeah. When I built my portfolio presentation, I was a bit naive. I didn't realize I was going to have to give a portfolio presentation till like a day and a half before I had to give one. So I had to take a lot of my previous presentations and talks that I had given and really quickly convert that into a job talk or portfolio presentation. And so I didn't really have a lot of time to research and see how other people did it. So I didn't follow like a case study format. Instead, I talked through how I worked with like community partners to engage with research in the community, how I worked with like the VA hospital system to do different kinds of things. And then I talked through a little bit of my dissertation and really just ended it with I'm a mixed methodologist. I am formally on the quant side, and here's all the skill sets that brings to the table. There's project planning, there's all of these different skill sets that really feed into who I am as a researcher, and this is why you should hire me. And then I had a little bubble off to the side that oh yeah, subject matter expertise that I didn't even talk about. So I talked about methodologies and things like that. And then after that was done, so I had like 24 hours to really kind of glom all that together. And then after I finally went to sleep after the portfolio presentation, woke up the next day, started looking at other people's, and realized I was supposed to do case studies. Didn't. It's like, oh. So I thought for sure I had like completely screwed it up. I wasn't going to get the job, but it turns out I did. So.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. We do have a few questions queued up in the chat. I see them. I will ask. Let's see. We had Shrees and Koyels and now Hangs. But I want to ask a follow-up question to that, which is when you were getting your first UX researcher job, do you remember how many applications and rounds of, like how many things you applied to, how many companies interviewed you, how many offers you got? And how
Yeah,
long it
so
took?
it took, so I had a thorough tracker of all the academic applications I had submitted. I had submitted 52 academic applications and got called back on 5 of them, got invited to on-sites for 2 of them, and got 1 offer. So that was my academic breakdown. I realized very early on that you don't submit industry applications the same way you submit academic applications. So the applications I submitted in September, I got callbacks in September. And that was very surprising. So I had to stop applying to industry roles until March when I defended my dissertation. And at that point, I had submitted probably close to 20 or 30 applications, got a call back for this vendor contract at Microsoft. And I went through 1 half-hour interview with the vendor company that was kicked over to Microsoft afterwards because they vet all of the vendors and then they submit the applications on your behalf. And I had an interview with Microsoft and was offered the position.
Okay, so that ended up going pretty well in the scheme of things. All right, let me go back
Yeah.
through some of the questions in the chat, including the one we just got from LinkedIn. You'll be last on the list. Going back up to Shri. Shri is asking, can you tell us about your experiences in leveraging statistics that you used in your academia world for your quantitative sides of UX research?
Yes, so I do a lot of the support for the research teams, figuring out, when is it best to use a more experimental method, kind of power calculations for A/B testing. Really, a lot of what I do with my statistics and experimental design is tying together telemetry analysis with user research and figuring out how to piece those things together. And that's not quite statistics, but it requires a lot of that experimental knowledge. A lot of what I've done with like opportunity analysis, where I use these global surveys to figure out what are the opportunities to really go after in a brand new product space. That takes, some max diff analysis, maybe a few CAN calculations just to make sure things are right. But like, it's not going to be. It's not going to be the really advanced experimental designs that you're used to doing in academia. Yeah, there's some behavioral modeling that you could do, but realistically, you're going to be doing a lot of the simpler methods throughout your career, and that's totally fine.
A world of standard deviations.
Yep. Please don't take averages on Likert type items. Okay. Got that one out there.
Okay, good. Everyone listen to that. And actually, Jen Blatz was just posting on LinkedIn that it's pronounced Lickert.
It is. It is.
All right, we got that out of the way. All right, going to Koyel's question. Do you ever encounter regrets of not being able to reach the right pool of participants? What do you do?
If you have the time, reach them. If you can't, business moves fast. There's really no good answer there. Like if you didn't reach the right people the first time, like the insights that you gathered really aren't going to be as beneficial as you want them to be. And so you either redo the study with the participants you feel like you need, or you find some way to make the insights relevant at least to the target group that you did gather, and see if there's any kind of connection between the target group that you got and the target group that you wanted. And so there's really no other way around that.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Let's go to Hung's question. Do UX researchers with PhDs generally have consensus on research methodologies and processes, or is it as fragmented as UX designers, like design thinking versus others?
Yeah. Everyone has, and I'm guilty of this too. I have my best practices that I feel are necessary. I'm a huge fan of documentation and paper trails because I want to make sure everything is ethical and on the up and up. Some people hate documentation and process and things like that, and they just want to do real quick iterative research, and we're just gonna get in and go, 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 go. I'm not that person. So it is just as fragmented, I'm sure. Debbie, you could speak to the larger field on this one.
Pass. I want to get everybody's questions in. We've only got 15 minutes left. Koyal has a follow up question to her question about not getting the right pool, and that was, what if you realize it after some research has already been done? I feel like you kind of answered that. So, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, just if you are in the middle of a study and you realize you have the wrong people, you have the opportunity to change that. You can cancel sessions. You probably still have to pay the participants, so like be aware there's monetary cost to doing that. But
Yeah.
if you realize at some point in the middle of your study it's the wrong people, cancel the follow-up sessions or figure out a way to use them for something that is relevant for that target, the group that you're interviewing. But, try to get the people that you need.
Yes, for Rizzle. Okay, we also have a question from someone in LinkedIn. Sorry, it's not giving me your name. It says, did you find that your doctoral degree helped or hindered you in transitioning?
I think I think both,
Oh,
honestly. Um, yeah, because so yeah, I think it's both because one, that ego piece, I had to swallow my ego and pride a bit and realize like, hey, I don't know it all. You know, got to learn the things. And I've talked about that already. But the second piece is I am a formally trained research scientist. I am a badass at what I do. Yes, it helped me because I learned so much in my PhD, and I can talk to you ad nauseum about the human brain and all the cool things that it can do. And yeah, that is something I am so incredibly passionate about. And I know, like, I start talking with my hands, I start moving. I'm like really excited to talk about the brain and what we can do with human behavior and cognition. And yes, so absolutely, it helped me.
cool. Yes, as soon as you said the brain and what it can do, I was like, and can the brain do design thinking? Sorry, just had to go there. Had to go there. Okay, Hung has another question, and people in the chat room thinks it's a great question. What are some common unethical issues you see in UX research, and how can we better mitigate these instances?
I'm gonna dunk on Facebook for a
Go
minute
for
here
it. Oh, I'm
because
with you.
holy cow, I have yeah, social media is one of these things that's like a double-edged sword. I have to have social media because this is how I connect with people. This is how I network. It's how I promote my book. This is how I have my coffee chats every Friday. I am like stuck with social media and I hate it so much. And this is like my little mini rant here because these companies do some of the most unethical things I have ever seen in user research. Like Facebook, and I realize they've rebranded as Meta, and that's
Doesn't
fine.
matter.
It still doesn't wipe the slate clean of what
Right.
they have done. And this is something that we've been talking about since 2005, 2006, right? When was the company made? 04, 03?
I know.
Like it's just a few years into it that we started talking about the ethical issues of Facebook. Things like manipulating news feeds to make people more or less depressed. And I realized that wasn't the actual research question, but that's the outcome of the research that they were doing. And this is something I think we have to be so aware of as UX researchers is the impact of our work extends beyond that single research question we are actually asking. And so we have to think. And as the advocate and as the voice of the customers, we have to be aware of what our work is doing to these people. And I know I'm getting like really amped up with this,
No,
but Facebook just
we're with you.
bothers
We're
me.
with you. I mean, that was the question. We want to talk about
Yeah.
these unethical things, and is there anything we can do to mitigate these? And I sometimes feel like it's up to the company's ethics. You're probably not going to mitigate unethical research at Facebook because the company's unethical, but maybe at a company that's trying to be more ethical, making research mistakes, maybe you have a chance there. What do you think?
I think it's up to every single person who works for the company to make ethical decisions. And that is something that is unpopular with a lot of people. So if you are an employee, I I challenge you to consider the ethics of your work and how your company is using your work. And if you are not being ethical, that is on you as an individual. You cannot push that off as your company is responsible for these things. And so yes, sometimes, we have to work with companies that don't make the most ethical decisions, and we don't necessarily agree with it. But we can look back on ourselves and go, was I ethical? Did I raise the ethical concerns? Did I do my job to be the voice for the customer, be the advocate for the customer? And if those answers are yes, I have done my part. And if
Yeah,
your
you
company
can't
continues to do
control.
this crap, just leave.
Yeah,
Find
you
another,
can't
and that's a
control
very
all those
privileged
things.
thing to say.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's
but
not going to be
leave.
available to everybody. And that reminds me of a follow up question that I had, which was speaking of ethics and research, once in a while someone will say to me, I'm a UX researcher in a corporate space, boop, bop, a beep, and my manager, stakeholder, whoever it is, keeps asking me for editable versions of my research report or research presentation. Sorry, I think I've given you a migraine. Sorry. Have you bumped into that? What are your thoughts on people who are in those situations? Do you give them the editable version? Do you not?
So I try to take the curiosity stance. And so I will talk to them about, why do you need the editable version? What is it that you would like to see changed? Let's workshop this together, figure out what is going on here. And really, if you have some good relationships with your partners, you can pretty quickly figure out what it is that they want. And you can tell them yes or no. You have that choice. And if at some point, they really push back and they really want that editable version, they can remake the slide. It's pretty straightforward. So, but if it's my work and my name is on it, I pretty well lock down what it is because I don't want someone taking my work and changing the meaning of it because it doesn't quite match what they want. But if it's something like visual or points not made clearly enough, usually that conversation is enough to clear it up, and I will go make those changes and pass them on.
Yeah, fair enough. And sometimes the changes people want make sense, and sometimes they're wading into unethical waters.
Figuring out that root cause is it's a really big point. So
That's my
yeah.
world. That's what wakes me up in the morning. Believe it or not, we're almost out of time. We have a
Man.
few. I know we have a few minutes left. I think we can probably take a question. But as we see if anybody has last questions, let me just remind people we had to postpone tomorrow's show again. Unfortunately, our guest still has COVID. So that one's going to be, he was scheduled for last month and he's still sick. So super worried about him and sending lots of love and healing. So I'll see everybody on Friday for critical thinking. Remember, if you want to send something in to be shredded to pieces for the Practicing Critical Thinking stream, please look at deltacx.com/links. Also, please subscribe and tell 3 friends about the channel because we are about to cross 5,000 subscribers, which we're very excited about. I've already planned a 5,000 subscribers celebratory office hours Ask Me Anything with special guest Debbie's boyfriend, who I think it'll be fun to see if he can answer the questions the way I would before I answer them. Like, because we share a home office, so usually he hears everything I say, and I think we're just at the point where even though he doesn't work in UX and has never had a corporate job, I think he would just know. So we're going to do kind of the comedy office hours with Pier Mario. And then let's see what's coming next week on the show. Next week, Monday, Think Out Loud. We'll continue working on the Disney Vacation Club. Tuesday, Office Hours, Ask Me Anything with special guest Jeremy Kriegel, who's been on the show before. Wednesday and Thursday, no show because I'm doing my Transforming Toward Customer Centricity workshop. If you'd like to join that, you can still sign up for it. Just go to deltacx.com, go to training, go to Transforming Toward Customer Centricity. It's next week. So yeah, that's what's coming. But mostly what I've been planning are a lot of guests at office hours. So that's what's coming. I don't see any final questions. So Alaina, why don't you tell everybody again where and how to find your book and how they can connect with you on all of these great social networks?
Yes, you can find me on almost all major social networks. On Facebook, Alaina Talboy. It's Alaina. Talboy is T as in Thomas, ALB as in Bravo, OY. My book is What I Wish I Knew, a field guide for thriving in graduate studies. That is available on Amazon and most major bookstores. You can also find it at my website, alainatalboy.com. And on Twitter, I am at Status Stress.
Status Stress. Can you spell that?
STATISTRESS.
Got it. Statistics plus mistress.
There you go.
All right, great. Yeah, so everybody is giving you lots of love and thanking, and yeah, the thanks and the claps. You might have seen some claps emojis go by. So I'm going to play us out of here, but thanks so much for coming on the show, and thanks so much for sometimes being in the audience and being a part of our community. And I hope you'll come back again in the future and tell us more about how things are going with the world of academia.
Will do.
Cool. Well, then, everybody be well and see you Friday. Bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are